Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to BWTM News and Entertainment. We have a very special guest with us this evening, all the way from America, Dr. Zebulon Miletsky. Dr. Zebulon, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm blessed and highly favored as always. Thank you so much for being on BWTM News and Sports. In particular, we're focusing on tonight race, culture, heritage, Black history. Really looking forward to talking to you about such subjects. So for people who don't know much about you, give us a little background to who you are and what you do.
Yes. Well, first, let me just thank you again for having me on. It's a pleasure. I know there's a strong fan base out there and a strong audience, and I just want to say greetings to everybody. I am a professor of African American Studies, of Africana Studies at Stony Brook University. I am on the tenure track. I am teaching. I am working with various groups. I love working with students, and I love teaching minds, and so it's been very rewarding for me.
Okay, great. I think your camera's gone.
Yeah, should come back up here. Sorry.
Okay, great, fantastic. Sorry. Okay, great. So, Doctor, first and foremost, it's straight away. I know you talk about being of mixed heritage, but even when I saw your picture when I first saw it, it's like, wow, this man is talking about Africana studies. And the first thing I thought to my mind is, well, is he actually being accepted by the Black community, those of darker skin? How does he relate to them, and is that a battle there or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the U.S. context, first of all. Mm-hmm. Race here, the way it works, say, in the States, so different, as you well know, from, mm-hmm. Europe and from other parts of the world. And so, if to reverse that question, if I were to be doing that, say, over there or somewhere else, I don't know. But here in the United States, we have a lot of traditions, a lot of histories. One known as the one-drop rule. I don't know if it's too soon to start talking about the one-drop rule. We're 5 seconds in here, but but the one-drop rule, and also, more importantly, though, in my case, just so happens that I grew up in the Black community. In the United States, in Boston, Massachusetts, Roxbury. Went to school in Roxbury my whole life, from elementary to middle to the higher grades, and lived kind of like right on the edge. And so that has a lot to do with it. Just so happens, in my case, I grew up around a lot of members of the African-American, Afro-Caribbean side of my family. Luck of the draw. And so for that reason, I guess I'm able to, I've always had that battle, though, that's for sure. And I could tell you a lot of stories, but there is room, and ultimately in the Black community, for someone like myself. And that's actually kind of how I got interested in African-American history, or when I got interested. I learned about someone named Charles Chestnut, who probably looked whiter than I do, even.
Wow.
Think of people like that, who's nobody would dispute that he's a celebrated African American, writer, and so you learn about Walter White, not from the TV show, but NAACP. That may have some walking. I don't know. We might have some. Well, I don't even remember that show, but so blonde hair, blue eyes, was able to go down south and investigate lynchings and use that. He was the head of the NAACP. So once I started learning about folks like that, I said, wow, my situation is not as new or as unique or as different as I always thought growing up. Mm-hmm. Like, there's nobody out here like me, but it's not true. And so that's a long tradition in the Black community in the United States. It changes when you go to the Caribbean. It changes, where how I would be seen as Black in other places, probably not. And I know that, and I know the places. So yeah, but it is still a shock. Doesn't change the shock on the first day of class. That's never going to change. I don't think. That first day, you're like, okay, but I earn it. You gotta, I let the information and the training and the facts and the evidence and what we put together and what we have put together in the field of African American studies speak for itself, and it really, really does. So you just become sort of the shepherd of it, and but yeah, to answer your question, it's still shocks people, I think.
So let's talk a bit about you. I know you said African American, but I know you talked about the Caribbean, but you didn't kind of delve too much into that, because my family are from the Caribbean, from Trinidad and Grenada. So talk to us about your family and where they come from, where they are from.
Oh boy, why did I bring that up? Well, my brother, I don't want to delve on this too much, but no, I'm just kidding. But well, in fact, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of it. The fact is that there's so many shades to the Black experience. There's so many shades to the Caribbean or so-called West Indian experience. In my case, it just so happens that my grandmother, on my mother's side, my mother's mother, was both of her parents were Jamaican.
Oh wow!
And yeah, and so that was my grandmother. Winifred Deer was her name. Her married name, maiden name, had a different maiden name, obviously. Sinclair. So anyway, yeah. But she was born in Boston, so she's from in the immigration kind of spectrum. You're born in the U.S.
Yes.
So a lot of the cultural things, there were some things, but it just so happens to be the case on my mother's side. And the other side of that is to say, my black side, my Black parent, mother's side, is also African American, and their folks are in North Carolina.
Okay.
And there's a little bit of Barbados thrown in there somewhere, but I don't want to, misstate it. So
okay.
But, there's a little bit of that in there.
Wow. Wow. I know you talked about your father's side being Jewish.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
How did that work out? I mean, obviously a Black woman and a Jewish man in America. How did that all work out? And them being together and to be so strong to have that relationship, do you think?
Yeah, well, it's not as rare as you might think. In the civil rights movement, for example, there was a lot of Black Jewish partnership. In fact, we tend to forget that sometimes.
Okay.
So there's a few other way more famous marriages of folks who were Black and Jewish, and I would think of Marion Wright Edelman and a lot of other people, Alice Walker, the famed author and poet.
Yes.
So her daughter wrote an amazing book about it, and so Rebecca Walker. So yeah, there's a thing. There is a thing, here in the U.S. on that. And my parents are pretty similar to that, in a lot of ways, except, a bit of they were a little bit late for the civil rights movement.
Right.
They were more sort of on the edge of power movement, or what other people have called the Rainbow Power movement, and say Black Power. And they met out in Berkeley, California. You could sort of the context, the place is right, you know,
Right.
and it's, you know, so they, like I said, they were a little late for the movement, but it was out of that same kind of spirit and tradition. And for them, you know, none of that stuff mattered. It was just like two people who met each other, you know.
Right.
You know, like most of these relationships.
Right. Let's talk a bit about what you teach. I mean, go a little bit more deep into what you teach at Stony University.
Oh yeah, I teach African American history courses. I teach like I get to teach some pretty interesting classes, like one class, recent African American history. I love that. I get to talk about like the '90s. I have a lesson on the crack era. You know what I mean? Like I have a lesson on hip hop. You know, yeah. Like we talk about HIV, the AIDS, you know, crisis. I mean, it's like it's pretty satisfying to be able to sort out some of that stuff that was happening, you know, so recently. But you know, politics is a big part of it, and we're going to be offering a class on hip hop very soon. Just got approved, actually. So it's exciting. I get to do a lot of, you know, my core thing is African American history and those kinds of classes, but I've gotten a chance to like go in other areas. I taught a class on Black popular culture, read a lot of Stuart Hall. The students love it. We did you know, so been dabbling a bit, you know, outside of my field, you know what I mean? But it's fun. And as long as you put the prep in, you know what I mean? It comes out really, you know, it comes out pretty well.
Diversity is a good thing, isn't it?
It is a good thing. It is. And yeah. I mean, I think that, yeah, we have to find like some new ways to teach it. You know, some of the you know, the people hear the same things over and over again. It gets a little bit boring. It gets a little bit stale. But absolutely, it's a good thing, and it needs to be embraced in the curriculum. You know, and it is, yeah, it really is, mostly due to our department and other multicultural departments at Stony Brook.
Right. Let's talk about your appearance on TED Talks. Let's talk about that and how that came about and what it was about.
Yeah. Oh, the TED Talk. Well, it was an interesting thing because that TED Talk, the theme of that TED Talk was actually on women. And so when they approached me, I was like, "Are you sure you know you want me to do it? Like, are you sure this is something that, you know, you want a man to do?" Or maybe I was like, maybe they have the wrong person. But it was really fascinating, and I actually had a chance to talk a little bit more publicly about my grandmother, who I was talking about before, and my mother, and really just go through leading up to it. Like I kind of had to just like lock myself in my room and really think about my connections in that regard. It was hard. It was not easy. It was a lot of soul searching, and it was a lot of stuff got churned up. I was dealing with my own stuff. And I just, wow, I didn't expect all that, you know. I really didn't expect. I didn't see it coming, but it was cool. You know, even though the theme was women, it was open enough where it was really just like, you know, something that felt, I almost didn't even notice or even think about it, actually.
Okay. In terms of, people usually have a backstory as to why they do something, especially when they're at the top of something. It's usually someone that may have upset them, or there may have been a triggering experience that made them think, you know what, I can do that better. I can do that a different way. Why is this happening that way? You may have been persecuted and felt, well, why me? I'm going to put this right. And you kind of put some sort of, I don't know, you become some sort of you become molded by experience to go out and make change. Why is it that you felt so passionate to go for African studies?
Oh wow. Well, it has to do with some of my mentors, actually.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, some people, and I won't even just mentors is not the right word. I mean, friends and who became colleagues later and who cared and looked out for me. And so, so when I mean, I guess I could say, like, I always loved history.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I really did. I always liked history, just U.S. history, the stuff we learned in high school, and especially, you know, times, the very few times that African American history would be talked about in those kinds of textbooks in the classroom. I'm sure your viewers know this, and I don't know what the condition is, you know, abroad, but here, African American history is mentioned very rarely in U.S. history books. It's, you maybe get like a couple pages on slavery, and you know, literally,
That's
and
it. That's it. We got
it's gotten
Victoria over
better.
here.
Yeah, well, at
Queen
least when
Victoria
I
over
was
here.
in school. Yeah, yeah. When I was in right, right. When I was in high school, that's how it was. And I hasten to say that it hasn't gotten as much better as it should, you know. But there's a great book about that called "Lies My Teacher Told Me." That, well, the title says it all. I know, it make you want to
What
laugh and
is it a
cry
bestseller?
at the same time. Yeah, but I always liked the history, and I think when I was younger and I was at that point where I was like starting to think about my own identity, and every mixed race person, biracial, hell, light skinned black person might tell you, you know, will tell you in the US especially, will tell you, like, you go through things around, it's either colorism within the community or just the, where do I fit in, you know, living betwixt and between, which is a real condition. In the literature, a lot of us refer to it as the mixed race experience. Uh, no matter what the combinations happen to be racially, there is a common set of experiences that all of those people tend to go through. Being asked, "What are you?" and, you know, all that stuff. So, but anyway, you know, when I got to college, I had an amazing gentleman who was there at that time. His name's Steve Pemberton. Um, he's well known in other circles today, but back then he was an admissions officer at BC, where he also went to school, and he was the one who suggested that I take a Black Studies class. That's just true. He was the first one,
Wow.
and he insisted on it, in fact, and it changed my life. It basically just changed my life. Once you added the part about learning about my own Black heritage and my own Black ancestry, which was a big, you know, was a gap for me. Even though I had gone to school in Roxbury, I went to William Monroe Trotter Elementary. We sang the Negro National Anthem every day. I mean, you know, it's not it's not like I didn't know anything, but I knew a lot, and that had piqued an early interest. But once you added those two things together, I was hooked. I said, this is what I like. This is all I like, and that's what I want to do. And
Wow.
I just started taking Black Studies at Boston College, an amazing program headed by a woman named Amanda Houston back in the day. A lot of folks have taken the helm. It's a great program.
Well, today I want to pick your brain on the mixed race experience for a number of reasons, and I will reveal those things to you. But one thing the first thing, let's start off being of mixed heritage or mixed race. Is there almost, when you realize that you are of mixed heritage, what's the first sort of things that you're confronted with being of mixed heritage? What are the first sort of questions that, as a young person, not so much as an adult, as a young person, maybe 11, 12, 13, that age?
Interesting. You know, it's funny you mentioned those ages, because if I had to pinpoint that moment where I think I, you know, really had a sort of consciousness about it, and a sort of clarity about the fact that I identified as a Black man, like, or a young Black when I was 12,
Yeah.
but would one day, you know, that was around that age. Around middle school. Went to a great middle school, Phyllis Wheatley Middle School. I don't think it's called that anymore. But that was what was happening then. It was a predominantly black school. You know, great
Roberta
teachers.
Logan,
And Zuhair Bilal and some other folk who taught us. They were teaching us about the history. They were planting those seeds. Then race was something we actually dialogued about, especially Mrs. Logan's class. Phenomenal teachers at that school. And so all the meanwhile, you know, as kids and as students, we were bumping up against one another. We were working things out, resolving, you know, things in a very sort of expedient way regarding identity and race. There's not a, you know, at that time, there's not a lot of, you know, that it could be a little bit rough. And so, I mean, what I had happening then was I had friends, one friend in particular, a brother named Farouk Brown. And he kind of coached me, you know, kind of like, you know, this is how you do it. I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of, you know, black big brothers, or, you know, just friends, like just people, you know,
yeah.
who act as almost even like a father figure sometimes, you know, older cats take you aside and they see what you're going through. They see the struggle, you know, and they're like, this is a possible answer. The problem is a lot of times some of us mixed folk, if it happens to be especially a black white mix,
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have difficult experiences and relationships to blackness, and people have a lot of stories of pain. They have stories of, you know, of hurt or of rejection. It's so complicated. It drills right down to our history as a country. It's like to really, you know, and it's like I'm 11. You know, it's like I'm 12. You know, I'm 11 out here, so I'm 12 right now. So what am I? You know, so you get bits and pieces. You're getting puzzle pieces. I got a lot of puzzle pieces from the teachers,
Right.
Ms. Logan especially, friends. You know, people will test you. You know, blackness is not an easy path to walk. You either better be about it, or you have to. I mean, you have to live it. You have to feel it. You have to claim it. You know, and that's what I've had to basically always do, is just, you know, make sure that like where folks knew where I was coming from, but it's coming from a place of love. And actually black people reciprocate beautifully, because they feel like, wow, you want to be with us? All right. You know, like good. Like
Did you
you know.
did you ever have to pick, like, say, well, I'm a black brother rather than being a white brother? Did you ever have to select? Did you ever hot fences and say, oh, well, today, you know, I can be white, today I'm going to be black, today I'm going to be in the middle? This fight, if there was a fight between a black guy and a white guy in the playground, was that ever an issue for you? Did you ever have to, or was it just, were you neutral to these things?
You know, it takes a while to become fully consciously aware in a sort of 360-degree way, I think, about how this all works.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and break it all down. For a long time, you know, this thing called race is it's real, you know. It's okay. Right. Okay. I say that because, you know, we have, you know, there's a lot of misunderstanding sometimes. Like we make the point that under the skin, we're not different necessarily, right? Race is not real there, but day to day, in your scenario on the playground, the black, white, yeah. And so see, Americans, you know, love for, you know, I think, like, you know, Americans, we you know, we eat, sleep, you know, breathe. Like, race is just part of us. It's part of our day to day. Like, you know, you don't think about breathing.
No.
Right. It just happens. You know,
yeah.
right under your nose, literally. Right. That's how we are with race. Like, we know there's an encoding, much the way maybe like language I think works. You
Right.
know how children can learn, how they say like at early ages they're like sponges with it. Something
Yes.
about that's how race is for us. We learn it at a very early age. We take it in. It's unfortunately you know, what goes along with just race is racism. Um, it's like it's almost like mother's milk to us. And the thing is, unfortunately, but that's our legacy and that's real. The problem is it's also invisible a lot of times. You know, it has an invisibility. So something that's so powerful and yet invisible, that's hard to work with sometimes, you know. But we, you know, we you know, like I think Americans, when we meet each other, there's a mental thing that happens very quickly. You know, you're sizing up, you're categorizing. What are you?
Where are you from? Are you Mexican? Are you black?
Yeah.
You look a bit Hispanic there, you know, brother. And you know, I'm African American. Huh? Guys, why?
Right. But you know, we do that size up. You may ask and get a different answer, but
Yeah.
the sizing up thing is something we do as Americans without even thinking about it, like breathing.
Course.
You
Yeah.
know,
I get that,
and it's true. You know, and I don't know how much we're always aware of it, but so for that reason, if you happen to be ambiguous, if you happen to be racially ambiguous, a good friend of mine named Kagan has a T-shirt called "Racially Ambiguous." If anybody wants to check that out,
right?
He, you know, if you happen to be in that ambiguous place, then you know, they can't. The sizing up thing it's not working.
No.
The input is not coming back, and so that's where problems can come. And so 90% of the time, you know, I could explain to you all the multiple scenarios and how they played out, but
right.
the point is coming back to kind of what you were saying, your question. I mean, is, you know, in Boston, Massachusetts at that time when I was growing up, the question was, why do you want to be with them? You know, like on the part of whites, they wanted to, they could send, they're like, you got something going on. I don't know. I mean, we would work with you if you were interested, but let us know, you know.
Let us know what you actually are. You're okay. You look a little suspect. There's something not quite white about you, but we're not quite sure what it is.
We would take you, but we would take you. That's it. No, that's it. But we'll work with you. We've taken a lot of people talking to you, so you want to come in, great. But no, so that's kind of the thing. It's like, where do you stand? Why do you, you know, because, you know, and the last thing I'll say is that in my case, on the mixed race sort of spectrum, as I like to call it, there's some of us who are sort of more, not really that dude. Like, I'm not like, you know, I'm more on the spectrum of white enough to pass, you know, on the mixed thing. And there's a lot of Charles Chestnut, who I was talking about. So Adrian Piper is another name that folks may want to look up. Amazing philosopher, wrote a bit, amazing piece in Transition magazine out of Harvard University. Used to be published in Ghana, but talked about things like that. She would leave cards, you know, on the table that basically, like, after hearing and witnessing a racist incident or someone saying something racist, she had these cards already printed. She's an artist, and she had these already printed up, and she would leave them, you know, and it was basically essentially said, you know, thank you for, you know, for your racism and so forth, but, you know, and so it was like a thought experiment, really deep. In other words, my experience is the one where I'm in the room and I get to hear the things that people say when they don't think black people are around.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Yeah. That's been my life, if I'm just going to keep it 100, as they say. And I used to think it was because, well, yeah, people, you know, America usually know. It's so weird. We can see our own, I guess. We spot our own.
Yeah.
experienced that more often than not. People were like, I knew it. You know, I thought maybe Puerto Rican, but whatever. You know.
Okay, let me throw another way to you. If you're, I'll give you another scenario. If you, okay, how important was it for you or for your parents to send you to an all-black school or predominantly black school instead of sending you to a white school or a mixed school? Why did they choose? You think to choose you going to a predominantly black school, and what do you think the benefits were, or the pros and cons of that?
Yeah, this is everything. I mean, without the fact that I happen to have attended all black schools, or predominantly black schools, my whole life, I'd probably be much different. You know, I don't know what I would be doing now. I don't know. I'd have been on that sort of journey. I didn't know I was on any kind of journey, by the way. You know, all these times, but you know, I kind of looking back retroactively, I started to see things, and it's really fascinating. I was really like nurtured in the heart of the black community of Boston. You know, and the thing is, my mother's family was kind of like people knew them, especially my uncle. My uncle Paul Deere is his name, and was a real sort of, you know, but they didn't emphasize it a lot. We didn't talk about the race thing that much. They just kind of let me do my thing, and no one worried about it. But they did put me, turned out, into predominantly black schools, and always somehow Montessori. I don't know if people know, there's about the Montessori movement, Montessori schools. Anyway, but the black Montessori is different from the
Okay.
one, but in a great way. And so I, you know, boy, I got so caught up in that I forgot what you'd asked me. But
The importance of being in a black school as opposed to being in a white school, in a white school and the environment. And if you hadn't been educated about your black side, I mean, and just been pushed into a white school because of the way you looked and because of your features, they said, "Oh no, let's not put him in a black school. Let's put him in more of a white school, so you know he can benefit more that way." You know.
It's funny. I mean, it would have been deadly for me. You know, I just don't know who I would have been. I think I would have lived a much different life. But if I gone to, say, a white school, it's hard for me to be that, you know, to represent blackness in such a white space alone. You know what I mean? I can't do that. But I tried, but I don't think it would have been great. The funny thing is, it's funny you asked that though, because, you know, in Boston, Massachusetts, maybe some of your viewers might know this, we had a thing, segregation in the 1970s. It made headlines across the world at the time, you know, basically moving, you know, busing African-American students from Roxbury, where I was talking about where I went to school, to South Boston, which was then very white, and vice versa.
Right.
In a city like Boston, you know, if you know Boston, not just Copley and, you know, the downtown part, but like, you know, the other parts of Boston, it's, you know, racially, that was a pretty hard thing to go through. So anyway, after the busing thing, there was a new idea for a new school to be a new model. It was called William Monroe Trotter Elementary School. It was the first sort of like school to see if this could work. And that's where, you know, that was by the 1980s. That's when I was coming, you know, into elementary school. So, so this is beautiful black school, brand new building, named after the famed, you know, journalist, William Monroe Trotter, pride and the jewel of the black community. But they had enough black students, and my mom wanted me to go to that school. My parents wanted me to go to that school, and to do it, to actually get in, they had to put down that I was white, because they needed white students at the school.
Wow.
And so the only reason I was part of that rich black heritage, you know, and all that came from going to an all-black school was because of a strange twist in the whole system. We got it changed later, but but you know, but anyway, that's how Boston could be, you know, after busing. It was a trip. Yeah, I said, you know, I don't want to say I survived the Boston Public Schools. I credit the school system a lot, but it was a pretty vigorous place to grow, you know, to kind of come of age in.
Your mother and your father both acknowledged that there was you were going to be of mixed race or mixed heritage. From your father's side of things, how much of his heritage did he want to impart on you, or how much of that, of being of white heritage, how much of that did he want to impart on you, or because obviously you put into a black community now, how much of that Jewish heritage was pushed upon you as well to keep the balance?
Yeah, not much really.
Okay.
You know, I mean, if you think about it, I think in a lot of mixed marriages,
yeah,
whoever the white, you know, person happens to be in that relationship, whether it's the wife or the husband,
right,
you know, they've chosen a black mate, they've chosen a black, you know, partner, spouse. That not in all cases. Now I want to be not in all cases, but oftentimes we have to recategorize all of the interracial marriages because, or try to. You can't get everything because it's marriage, it's life, you know.
Yes.
But oftentimes there's usually a person. And oftentimes the white person who is excommunicated from their family for marrying a black person.
Right.
Right. So, you know, they've lost their family for this choice. And in my case, in my father's case, that was sort of true for a while. We patched things up. We've tried, but rough early years there. And so all I'm saying basically is that, so for someone who has basically cast their lot with black folk, right, who has been kicked out of their family, you've essentially been kicked out. Your whiteness has sort of been revoked in a way. You're no longer recognized there, and because you've chosen to be with black people,
right,
and that's my dad. You know, that's basically the story of my father. He was a pretty courageous individual. Yeah, he is still with us, thank God. He did. And so in his case, you can imagine his ideology. It's not
yes,
one of me. It was, you know, that wasn't like that. He was incredibly supportive. It was incredibly, he knew black history himself and would talk to me about stuff. Very compassionate. Someone else, a colleague of his who wrote a sort of book of memoirs, this amazing doctor, Dr. Jim O'Connell, who is a street doctor to homeless folks in Boston, Massachusetts. My dad worked with him for many years, and he wrote in his book, called my dad's, I want to get this right, but like a philosopher on race and guilt, something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
Great book, Jim O'Connell. And yeah, my dad was like that. I always thought so. He tutored me on everything having to do with the 1960s. You know, he has a lot of stuff from the 60s, you know, counterculture stuff. Really broadened my education. I didn't understand, I didn't know that at the time, but and gave me a lot of books.
Okay.
I've got so many books on Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Black history. Most of them all signed, you know, inscription by him. So it's that's how he was.
He encouraged and inspired you. Great.
Totally.
Okay, we're going to put two here, more the psychological side of things. No man's land. Not accepted by the white society because you've got a drop of black in you. not society accepted by the black community because you're not actually fully black, you're white. How does that work, and how do you psychologically overcome that no man's land, you can't win one way or the other situation?
Well, see, that the thing is, I've always felt like unsure about that characterization.
Okay.
You know, I mean, for me, for my belief system and who I and also what I've learned and studied as a historian about this country,
right?
There is it's not a no man's land. There is a place for you. It's in blackness, you know.
Okay.
Because black people are the most accepting folk. You know, they're open. And then also, as I had mentioned earlier on, we have something called the one drop rule, would essentially, you know, at least used to say that if you had, you know, any black ancestry, you are considered black.
It still exists.
Very much so. Very
much so. Very much so.
Listen, yes. It's the rule, right? It's the one drop rule.
Absolutely, still exists.
So I mean, you know, I think some folk, you know, if you try to, and I admire people who, you know, they've developed really complicated and interesting ideologies about where they are racially. I think of this gentleman, Charles Michael is his name, BYRD. Amazing theorist on like that betwixt and between and what that was about, and interesting perspectives. I didn't always agree. But in fact, yeah, but very illuminating. And so some people, you know, have really taken seriously the notion that one white parent, one black parent, you know, that's both of your heritages. You are both, in other words. And I do believe in that to a point. I think that it puts, at least in the case of black, white, biracials, you know, essentially we are another subset of blackness, right? We are struggling about it and we don't want to quite, you know, be there, and sometimes, and it can be hard. And so I think it's the rejection by some folks have felt rejected by the black community.
Yes.
Not everybody went to, like me, I just so happened, like I told you, went to all black schools, and you know, you can hang, you know, you can talk, you can be around because that's who you actually are. But for folk who grew up in, like, say, in the suburbs, you know, in the US, who grew up in, you know, areas that did go to the white schools, not the black schools like I did, whose complexion may even be, you know, much darker or just be black, you know, in the suburbs or black in rural areas, they don't know that much about black history sometimes. They just don't have the connections. It's also luck of the draw. You know, in a lot of mixed marriages, like any marriages that break up, if it's the father who's black who happens to leave, let's say.
Yes.
Okay, you're not going to get that, you know, connection. You're not going to get that knowledge. It depends. There's a lot of white mothers who buy those books.
Before you go on, I want to hold you right at that point. Black father, white mother. Black father decides to leave because the relationship is confrontational. Mother decides to hold father, to stop child from seeing father, and mother wants to keep child in a white environment. Doesn't want to isolate him to just white people, white environment, white schools, and doesn't want to engage the young boy or the young girl into black culture or black community. What are the effects of something like that later on for that young person?
Yeah, it's the luck of the draw. I mean, you know, the effects can be, you know, some real damage in terms of identity.
Yes.
A dislocation, carrying around, and I know a lot of biracial friends, and I've really observed this, who carry that pain still. You know, they weren't accepted. Or, you know, especially during, say, like the 70s, Black Power. If everyone's got their fist there raising Black Power, and you're coming around talking about, well, I'm mixed, it's like, okay, and yet some very mixed people in the Black Panthers themselves, in the Black Power movement, who chose blackness. And so that's my point. Like, you know, you really, it's an uphill battle, you know, if you want to try to go against that grain. But a lot of people do it. And I think the reason is because of pain inside about rejection. I actually like started a group. It's called Learning About African American Culture, or Black. Because my notion is that it's never too late to learn blackness, you know? And you're struggling with this and carrying this your whole life, you know, you can not learn blackness, but learn Black history, Black culture. That's kind of like, I've seen it happen in my classroom. It happened to me. The knowledge is empowering. It's enlightening. It's exhilarating. It's life-changing. And so, you know, biracial is learning about African American culture. People find it to be very satisfying. You know, you gotta, it's one thing to identify as Black, but it's nicer to have a satisfying Black life. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
You know, and you know, so there's a lot of satisfaction in learning about that culture. Knowledge is power. Always has been, still is. You feel empowered. You feel like you can high. And even if somebody might, you know, and it happens to me still sometimes, people questioning it. I've found most often that folks who question my blackness have issues with their own blackness. Like in every single case, you know?
Yes.
Like, you know, like if we're all standing in a room together, Black folk, dignified people, you know, dressed nice, looking good, you don't know. You can't tell, like, someone inside is hurting about their blackness. I can't tell that. But
No,
when they come up, but when the way that I can have been able to tell, though, is the person who's coming and tries to question mine.
Yes.
That's when I'm like, bingo, it's you, sir. I didn't know. Okay.
But
you know,
when they look at you, they've got a question to, if there's any unsurety about themselves, they face you and they look at you, and then they've got to question further, because there's a question to be asked. So where are you from? I identify myself as Black, brother. And then the brother goes, no, you're not Black, I'm Black.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's a good point. It's not always coming from a bad place.
No, it isn't.
It's not always. Yeah, that's true. I can kind of tell the difference. So they look like they're about to explode when they say it. That's okay. There's something going on with this guy, but not all the time. That's right. And then people are curious. People do want to know. I can usually tell that difference. And when I know that it's a friendly fire, I'm like, you know, I'm totally open. But yeah, I think people do want to know or understand a little bit. I think also, though, I still have to say, just to put a little on it, that I think sometimes, I don't know, I never thought this could happen. You know, I never even knew if I'd be accepted as such myself. But I think sometimes people are like, wow, like, if this dude being Black, like, you know what I mean? Like, how did that, you know, it stops them for a minute. And it's our conditioning, man. You know, I mean, like, this is oppression is real. You know, the effects of it are real. The effects of colonialism are real on the mind, you know. Homer, you know, let your audience know that Black folks in the U.S., we're also think as a, you know, colonized people, and you know, and that's been the most useful framework to understand our true in the U.S. in my opinion. You know, we read Wretched of the Earth, Frantz Fanon, the mind. I don't fault anybody. In fact, even the guy who was me, you know, who just might have come at me wrong, we always there, you know, because I get it. I'm like, you're in pain. I get that. You know, it's not your fault. It's not our fault, you know. we were brought, you know, in the U.S. experience and the Caribbean, you know, folks were brought involuntarily into this situation called, you know, slavery, colonialism, and race, and the effects are with us still. And those of us who do work to eradicate it, you know, we try, but you know, it's still out there. One mind at a time, you know.
I was watching a clip. Actually, it was "I'm Not Your Negro," the movie that I haven't seen the movie yet, but I'm going to see it. But there was a clip where you saw black men being pulled off by white officers. Now, for a person of a black person watching that around that time, I'm sure there'd be a lot of hurt and maybe a lot of bitterness to what was going on. Now, for somebody of a mixed heritage, black and white heritage, if you're seeing a black man being pulled off of a rail by a white or Caucasian individual, what goes on in the mindset of a mixed race individual or of a mixed heritage, of black and white heritage? What goes on there? And so, yeah, and is there any sort of like maybe self-hatred? Oh, it's because I'm black this is going on, or because I'm white, look at the terrible things I've done to black people. How do you interpret something like that when you see it?
Now, if I understand the question, I mean, you're saying how a mixed person might. Can you help me with that question?
Okay, let me break it down.
I want to make
quite a lot I said.
Sounds like a great question.
It's from the heart. That's probably why it's so little. You're watching clips back of things that happened in 1970, right? And as a mixed race individual, seeing a black man being hosed down or a black man being pulled off a side of a street, and the police are being treating the black people very distastefully. How do you view that? How would a mixed race person view that situation or watch things back on that? Would there be any self-hatred going on one way or the other? It's because I'm black this is happening. It's because you're white because this is happening. What goes on there when you, as a professor or doctor, are watching that? What sort of internal feelings are you getting?
Oh, well, I mean, you know, first of all, you got to see that movie. You got to see that movie. I'm Not Your Negro. It's amazing. Of that screening of it in Long Island for a very select audience, and it was that was a communal experience, and plus I saw it myself, and everywhere I've seen it, there's a communal experience and response in the audience to what's being shown. You know, I think that, I mean, I can only speak for myself.
Right.
I think we tend to complicate, you know, some of the issues of race. Or it comes down to even having a distinct point of view.
Right.
You know, someone is like, well, I took it like this, you know, and I took it in that direction. And you're like, okay, and you know, I mean, the racial violence, it's familiar to me. You know, we saw it in Boston. You know, it's like, you know, there were places and neighborhoods back then. I'm ashamed to say they're better now, but back in those days, there were neighborhoods where black people just simply could not be after dark. You just couldn't go there. You know, and if you were, it was almost 100% chance of some kind of racial violence or racial assault or attack for having breached that borderline. And so when I was watching I'm Not Your Negro and watching, you know, some of the ways that we're policed, you know, the ways that we're in you know, warehoused, that we're, you know, sort of cordoned into one place and controlled. You know, we fool ourselves in our modernity, you know, in this time, and think, well, we have the police and we have law and we have this. What I see the same things I used to look when you look at those images during slavery, you know, and you look at those images during that time. It's a different name to it, but the racial control part is the same. You have to be sort of boxed in and forced into, you know, and so that, I don't know, that's what I, you know, I think as a historian, I'm trained not to feel anything.
Right.
In fact, when you watch that, you know, and that's a little bit of a pity sometimes, an unfortunate thing of the field. But of course you feel it. You know, of course you feel it. You know, you wish that things weren't the way they are. That blackness, the skin, the color, you know, was not a mark. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a mark in this country. It's a visible mark. It's when you look at the system, slavery, and how it was devised, it's systematicness. You know, they found a way to visibly mark, in a sense, someone as a slave upon sight. There's a new book about that. It's not about that, but about a lot of other things. Ibram Kendi's book that just came out, and so yeah, Stamped from the Beginning it's called, and yeah, stamped from the beginning. You know, and we are stamped from the beginning. What a brilliant way to look at it, and true. So I don't know, but it's painful, of course.
It is, absolutely.
You know, all
absolutely.
of us, I think, who work on the side of justice and stuff, feel that pain. But at the same time, you know, from a movement point of view, you need things like that. You know, you need the crisis, you need the calamity, you need, you know, I mean, as hard as it is having Trump as president right now, I mean, one thing about it that's good is the movement has never been stronger. You know, I mean, you know, 10 years ago, you couldn't even like find anybody to like do anything. Voter registration, you know, we're gonna have a protest. People were like, yeah, whatever. You know, I mean, or we're trying to do anything that was like civil rights kind of fighting. You know, nothing.
But now,
and so now it's changed.
You've got
And so you know, there is, it's a thing called, it's about justice. You know, it's about justice. Essentially, you need, you know, that injustice can spark a real justice-based movement, and there is one building now.
Okay, now we're going to start going there.
Obama.
Okay. Obama. I'm just going to say a few things, and then you can respond to it. Oh, you black should be happy now because, you know, you got a black president. You know, we're not racist in America. You got a black president. Aren't you happy now? And then black people say, well, no, he doesn't do anything for us. He does stuff for you, but he does nothing for us. You get some that say that. Others say, we're proud to have a black president and blah, 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 blah. Tell us your take on the Obama era.
Oh, man. You know, I'll tell you, there's a scholar named Keeanga Yamada Taylor who has a book about Black Lives Matter, but then also this article that she wrote, I believe it was for The Nation, and it is the best explanation of the Obama era I think I've ever read.
Okay.
And so folks may want to check that out. I mean, basically, you know, it was confusing at the time, right? We have a black president, so like, why are black you know, young men and women getting arrested and getting killed? Why is Trayvon Martin getting killed? We were having, you know, we had a real sort of like crazy moment there. And I think that, you know, the racial thing, it kind of threw a wrench in the works. It changed everything for the moment. You know, black was white, white is black. You know, it's like, you know, you can only explain like the fact that Trump got elected now, in my humble opinion, because we had a black president.
Yes.
You know, I mean, right? And so the racial thing, it changed the landscape. I think it was such a across the board change. You know, only racial scholars, some of the best racial scholars, could really explain to us what was happening in these last 8 years. I took a stab at it. I've written a piece which is hopefully coming out soon, and I was talking about, you know, some of those issues. It's incredibly complicated. It's incredibly complex. But I think to sum it all up, one thing I would mention is the idea of colorblind, the colorblind era that we're in, right? The post-racial era. But even not so much post-racial yet, but that color blindness idea, you know, that lens helps to explain a lot of the stuff that took place. I did a whole talk on this. Maybe I just referenced that, and it is up now. People look on mixedrace.org. I think they put that up. I believe he definitely, Stephen, I put that up. So, but it's hard to predict sometimes what was happening. We now know that all the while Obama was elected, you know, obviously, like a lot of white nationalist groups and that kind of things were organizing. They were building the Tea Party, the birther thing with Trump. All the signs were there, and I think we were in sort of almost like a racial sort of panacea at the time, you know, where that's another part that has not been talked about, the sort of eyes closed nature of Black leadership and Black, you know, the Black infrastructure during the Obama era, because it was sort of, you kind of didn't have to worry about it, you know, but it was all happening, and we sure paid the price. And Obama for himself, you know, I think that people, last thing I'll say about it is that people need to stop, you know, bending and twisting Obama to something that he wasn't. You know, he was a Black politician, a neoliberal politician. He was, you know, sort of a centrist Democrat. He, you know, and I think that I assume that they reasoned with themselves as the first Black president. We're not going to move in too many directions on the racial thing. We're going to just, you know, sort of like be the best president that happened to be Black, you know, if that makes sense. So with that kind of racial approach, now it could have been different if someone else, you know, Jesse Jackson had been elected. I think he'd have been more of a radical Democrat, you know, but that's what we got. And that's, you know, and Black folks, as you may recall, were slow to accept Obama at first. I mean, people came around. John Lewis, you know, was with Hillary, and a lot of people finally came at the end because, sure. So I think a lot of things got projected onto him. A radical, he wasn't, but at the same time, he freed more prisoners probably than anybody else. He went to the prisons. I can't recall another U.S. president doing that. But he also had drones, and he also did a lot of other bad stuff in the name of American imperialism and democracy. I'll stick with what I said. So, I mean, that's it. You know, you gotta take the Obama that was. Now it's time to look at the historical legacy. You know, you know, the moment has sort of passed, and and really dig down into what he was and what he was not is what I think.
I want to kind of stand that point just for a point for a moment in terms of Obama, and I had a great point to bring up, and I just completely lost it. Typically, he wasn't as supported as he could well have been. So they say. A lot of things he wanted to put into place, he couldn't put in place because he wasn't supported. One of the things that I noticed from the UK or from Europe that was quite evident is that despite America talking about they're cutting down on racism and racist things, even within the government, Obama was still being called racist, unacceptable names.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it happened all across the world too. I mean, there was that Belgian newspaper that had, you know, a picture of Michelle Obama and Barack Obama as apes. You know, it was on the cover of. So right. You know, everybody in the world, in my opinion, but at least your viewers, needs to watch a documentary called Ethnic Notions. It's called Ethnic Notions from 1980s, bit dated, but actually totally stands up. and it explains the history of some of those racist images and how deeply ingrained they are, you know, in people's spirits and so forth. And so whether it's deeply ingrained or not, it's also a tool to them. You know, it's like, it's a way of keeping a black man in his place, I believe. You know, okay, like, yes, you may be the president of the United States, but, you know, here's what we can do to you. We can, you know, we can't destroy you, but we can destroy your image, or we can try to, or we can, you know, we can. Got so creative. I used to live out in the Midwest, American Midwest at that time. Mm-hmm. And, you know, people would have built things like in their backyards, like with stones and bricks, and painted it, and, you know, all, you know, I mean, horrible stuff. You know, it was like a lynching or something of Obama, or like, you know, but it's like, it just makes you think, like, what is all the time that you put into something like this? You know, was it? But of course, it does. It has a powerful effect, and so that's what that imagery is about, I think. Yeah. I mean, you know, his hands were tied in a lot of ways.
Right.
You know, his hands were really tied, as I think we should expect. First African-American president. Nobody saw that coming. No, when Obama got elected, people said, I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime. Right? 2 or 3 years later, it was like, oh yeah, there's Obama. He's on TV again. You know, you know what I mean? When he first got elected, what I remember everybody talking about was like the fear that he would be assassinated.
Yeah, like every week he was getting assassinated.
That, you know, I think it's been enough time now to be able to talk about this. I hope it's appropriate to talk about. I don't even know, but I remember a lot. You know, that's what was on a lot of people's minds.
Of course.
Gosh, I don't know. That's a touchy subject, but
yeah,
but
absolutely.
You know, but I think you get my point. Is
absolutely
just that, you know. So in a lot of ways, you know, he succeeded. Use that as your sort of starting point. And I don't know how everybody expected that to go. You know what I mean? I mean, it wasn't going to go well. It wasn't going to go great. I mean, you know, it wasn't going to be perfect anyway. Like,
yeah.
You know, no way. And it taught us a lot, I think, about, you know, what's there's this, you know, I think people really thought racism had gone away. You know, we really were thinking that, like, we solved this thing. I mean, when I was coming of age in my generation, I would be like, I guess, Gen X. That's what we thought. You know, we really did. Like, we got a few problems here and there, but we're working on it. Racists were fake. It was fake to be racist. Not so right now. And so Obama's election was about more than just the presidency. I think it was about the searching for the soul of this country, honestly, of our country, the U.S., and the world, apparently, because the ricochets, you know, with Brexit and everything, it's pretty amazing.
Okay, I wonder, the last for today, our last kind of thought process would be the American dream. I hear so much about the American dream, the American dream. Does the American dream, is the American dream limited to white Caucasians? Because it seems that if you have a drop of black, or you're black, then you're going to get stopped. There's a possibility of you getting shot. There's a possibility of you getting incarcerated. Talk to me. Is the American dream really an American dream for everybody, or is the American dream just for a select few, dependent on race?
Yeah. Oh man, great question. Yeah, right. You're right. You know, those are infringements upon liberty. You're not free if you can't move about. If you are a black man and you cannot, like, you know, drive your car from point A to point B without being stopped, without being harassed, that's not full freedom. And it's definitely not a fully realized version of the American dream. I mean, I do think that the American dream is something that has to be fought for too, right? That's our legacy in America. African Americans have been fighting to live that American dream and thereby making it a real thing, like through fought in every American war, right? This time, if we give our blood and if we die, it will finally accept us. And every single time, they find that's not the case, but it starts to have a residual effect, right? A dream is created. I think that for African Americans' case, that American dream, it's not a given. That's the difference, it seems to me. There's a Black American dream, though.
Right.
And it's one that has had to be hard fought, protected, sustained, the planning, the power, that has gone into some of these things. The Black church, don't forget about that, the power of that. The thing that people need to understand is America is about certain things from day one, right? Let's just boil it down. We're about all men are created equal. This is, the home of the American dream. It's the home of liberty. And yet it could never reach its own goal, right? This country could never quite live up to its own stated principles. It's Black folks in America who make America live up to its own stated principles through the civil rights movement and through the different movements. And so therefore, it's African Americans are the ones that helped America realize its own dream, and without Black folk, it never would have. And, it's like, Martin Luther King talked about it. A lot of folks have talked about it. But essentially, it's like, this is what you said you wanted to be about. I think that's how Black people look at it. It's like, this is your stuff, be true to what you put down on paper, right? But that's okay. Even though you've dogged us, even though you've treated us badly, we're going to help you realize your own thing. And we're going to make it real for you and for Black people and for all Americans. That's the point. Black people are the conscience of this nation. They are the ones that push America to be great, truly great, right? And other groups, not just African Americans, Mexican Americans, civil rights movement, Asian American, Latino, the Young Lords, the Brown, everybody, the Mexican, the farm workers movement. That's what's pushed America to live up to its own things. And a Supreme Court that understood. The Supreme Court apparently has understood what these movements were trying to do all along. And once those cases have come up, they affirmed it. And they said, yes, and so it's a broadening of liberty for all people, essentially. It's a broadening of liberty. And right now we're seeing an assault on that liberty. And that's the problem. But it's for Black folk, it's not a given. It's something we have to fight for every day. And thank God, thankfully, a lot of people have been willing to do that, and are doing it right now as we speak.
When will all men be made equal in America?
I mean, it says we're only created equal, I mean, I don't even think it's about necessarily equality in terms of having everybody be the same.
No,
but it's about access. It's about equal opportunity. Just be true, again, like I said before, be true to what you put down on paper. If you said these things are possible for all Americans, and I am an American, and I happen to be a Black American, then therefore I should be able to do these things. And yet there's all these restrictions. There's the 13th Amendment, and that has in it that clause that explains that essentially, let's say, like, if you are arrested or not arrested, but convicted, I should say, of a crime. There was a whole great documentary about it called 13th.
Mm-hmm.
The exemption clause, then essentially you are, slavery is only exempt, is only illegal except where you have been convicted of a crime. In other
Yes.
words, that it's saying right in the law to our faces, essentially, that, you know, if you contradict that, that you are in effect legally,
A slave.
that slavery is, that you are a slave
Legal. Yes.
legally. It was right there. And so so America's real good at, like, you know, loopholes, you know, after slavery. You know, you got to remember that in our country, I mean, Abraham Lincoln at one point, you know, he had the idea of removing black people somewhere else. He's the person who wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, great emancipator, but he himself earlier on, you know, had a different idea. Nobody could quite envision what America would be like with black and white people both being citizens. Like, no one could see that. And a lot of people didn't think it would work. A biracial democracy, biracial, not, you know, in that sense. And so it's a great experiment. And as I've been saying, it's black folk who push the boundaries and actually widen those rights and liberties. I mean, the civil rights movement, and then the other movements that follow. The LGBTQ movement has used every part of the civil rights movement and then a movement, an important movement, and liberated themselves, gay marriage, etc. So these things work. Now we're seeing the backlash to that. But in the end, it's about widening the opportunity for liberty, as you say, for more and more people. But it's not a given for everybody unless you fight for it.
Who do you think was the brain box to bring all the Africans over to America as slaves? And at the end of the day, knowing that you brought a first ship of slaves over, and you know it's not working. It's not working. But you keep doing it. It's not working. The integration is not working. You don't want your women to be impregnated by black folk, but you bring them over. You don't want them in your shops. You don't want them in your land. Yeah, you bring them over. Who was the brain box behind this? And surely now what you're getting is the backlash for what you created in the first place. You should have just left the people alone where they were. I mean, simply said.
Yeah.
But I mean, you understand what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of my mentor, one of my professors, John Bracey, used to teach us. I went to grad school at UMass Amherst, and he used to teach us that, contrary to popular belief, the South is the most integrated place in the country. You know, we talk about like, you know, the years of Jim Crow and segregation, and you get this sense of two separate worlds. Right. But this is, that's the surface, you know, internally, and what's really makes things work is as a very integrated society. You know, the food. I mean, almost if you were a white Southerner during that time of slavery, every food you ate was prepared by black hands. We know that, but also, but also had a little black seasoning and a lot of, you know.
Yes.
You know, it's like sometimes I've been in a city where I want soul food, but you can't find soul food. I'm like, I'll take a Southern restaurant because they eat the same stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, not everything, but yeah. I'm sure people would, that you're gonna get emails about.
But hold on, Rosewood.
You've been there.
Was it Rosewood? The movie Rosewood I watched. Was it Rosewood?
Yeah.
That movie
John
disturbed me so much. Yes, disturbed me so much.
Great movie.
Great movie.
I mean,
yeah.
Upsetting movie, but yeah. No, they tell it well there. They give a good, you know, they give a good sense of what that's about. Perfect. Exactly. And so yeah. And that's what I mean. Thank you. That's what I meant by that. And so, you know, I think it had to be the money. It had to be mostly, you know, greed. It had to be mostly that, and then a Christianity that sort of seemed to justify things, at least the way they, you know, interpreted it.
Yes.
I mean, the fact that most of the slave ships were named after
Jesus,
you know, Jesus and
Jesus,
religious things. Listen, yeah, why don't you hold a sign up that says feel guilty about slavery? You know, that one.
I've been told stories about the slave ship who said, just bring me sweet Jesus. And they thought that was actually Jesus, but it was actually the slave ship. Get me off of the plantation. I want to go back home. So the ship was made as sweet Jesus.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. You know, you have things like the curse of Ham that supposedly explain these things in the Bible, and a lot of people believe that stuff. They did. They believed in that kind of stuff. Depends on which era. Great work on that. Black Image and the White Mind. It talks about all that stuff. George Fredrickson, I believe. So yeah, it's true. It's true. And so that, you know, so the clues are there.
They're all there.
To answer your question about the psyche of the thinking there, the slave ship names is a clue. That suggests something. You know, a lot of things that we end up seeing happening kind of give us an insight into the mind there. And I don't know, you know, I mean, I think that you know, anyone, you know, people who are wondering like how America became like the richest country and the, you know, the fastest growing, you know, we're the youngest empire, youngest, you know, sort of
exploitation.
it's a shortcut. It's a big
That was
shortcut.
the only way it could have been done.
It had devastating effects and consequences. And so you gotta, now we're drilling down. It's this thirst, a hunger for conquest. It's
and power,
unimaginable. Yeah. Willing to do anything, go through anyone. Yeah. And also with an understanding though, like we tend to think they didn't understand anything about Africa, but you know, they did. They knew that Africa had its empire already. You know, Africa had its place already, and they knew of that great empire. But they're not doing so great right now. Like, we can exploit this, and that's what happened. That's part of what happens.
Wow, that is definitely something we need to go more in depth with in another conversation, because we're going to be here all day and all night talking. And
well, that's right.
So much.
That's right.
So much. Right. Doctor, is there anything else you want to just give us a little to end on for today?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, you know, I would thank everybody, you know, for listening. I mean, you know, I think that the thing is, we got to talk to each other more like this.
Absolutely.
You know, I want to thank you, brother, for this, and thank you for your show, and thank you for, you know, what you do, because, you know, it's hard to get people to talk about all this stuff. And I don't, you know, always have the opportunity to do it. But it's real critical. The timing demands it. You know, the timing demands it, and we gotta figure it out. We gotta start talking to each other. We have to share what we do know, and what I don't know, maybe you know, and we match that together, and then we might figure out, you know, a piece of the answer, because it's got to be about some solutions. It's got to be about clear thinking, and I like how you do your thing. I like your show. I love how you do this, and it's good, clear thinking, and it's and answers. Because, like, you know, a lot of the stuff we look around and think, well, like I started like that. I said, people said, like, you know, you'll never solve racism. That's unsolvable. You know, you can't solve that stuff. No, but that's how we used to think. I mean, when I was growing up, Absolutely. That's how it was. You know, it was like, that's something that will never be solved. No, it turns out there's a science. It's called Black Studies, first of all, and it's called also Whiteness Studies, and it's called anti-racist curriculums. And there are some stuff, there's things that work. Absolutely. You know, there's some stuff that actually works, and you can spark that change. And so, you know, we're not interested in indoctrinating anybody. We're just interested in finding the truth.
I tell you where you start. Your greatest export. Do you know what America's greatest export is?
Britney Spears.
Media. Media. If
Wow.
you could change the way those who control the media control the minds, and I believe that if we were to educate via the media and stop propaganda and saying one race is worse than the other race, and put things out the way they should be, as opposed to the way they want them to be.
Yeah.
And history, not his story, but the truth, the facts.
Yeah.
If those things are put out the way it should be, where people come from, how they got there, the original points, if those things are put out there, then there's less room for the finger pointing, the accusations, and the preconceived ideas.
Yeah. Yeah,
because I'm
you're
me just
really,
telling the truth.
yeah, you're onto something. I think you're onto something. You know, it's true. It really is. And it's only in that confusion and then fake news and everyone's confused and social media is a factor. I don't care what happens. I mean, 30 years from now, they might be beaming the information into our cerebral cortex. You know, what will never change is facts and, you know, evidence and argumentation and information. You know, that's universal. They
Absolutely.
had to do it in 1776. They had to do it in 1619. They got to do it in 2017.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, and so don't give up hope. I love what you do, man. Thank you for the show. It's a blessing and it's a beautiful thing, man. I'm really part of it.
Doctor, we look forward to having you on a regular basis to educate us and to stimulate the mind. And with your expertise and my enthusiasm, hopefully together we can continue to educate others and stimulate conversation and maybe just change some mindsets. If not change, then just flicker the light switch on.
Yeah, one mind at a time.
Absolutely.
It's just a matter of
Absolutely.
time. All right, my brother. Thank you so much.
Dr. Miletsky, thank you so much for talking to BWTM.
All right.
There you have it, Dr. Miletsky from Stony University with us. We appreciate it and thanks for watching. Take care.
All right.